And I think that's what we can do to shed light upon these issues. And I see that the petitioner is in agreement with me, so that's good. Have a safe trip back, and thank you for coming. Hope to...
Grazie.
We wish you the very best in a very beautiful corner of Europe. Now, let's move to item 10, which is follow-up of the Brexit petitions on citizens' rights. We have received a number of petitions. We have organized hearings together with the LIBE committee. The Parliament as an institution has intervened by resolutions, and I personally have been very deeply in cooperation with the Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, in my capacity as chair of the Conference of Committee Chairs. So we have done our utmost on behalf of this committee to make sure that we take Brexit into consideration also from the perspective of the petitions brought forward to this committee. Before I summarize it, I start by summarizing at the very beginning of this discussion. Everything will be open, all the petitions. We are not closing any petitions on Brexit. We are keeping them open, and we are monitoring very closely now on a day-to-day basis the developments following the rejection of the withdrawal agreement by the UK Parliament and the government's very narrow survival of the motion of no confidence tabled by the opposition. So that's the context in which we operate. But it's always good to discuss. And therefore, I'm happy to give the floor to the petitioner, Fiona Godfrey. If you could limit yourself to 3 minutes would be excellent, because we will lose the interpreters. At 6:30 sharp, they are leaving the room. So that's why I urge you to be as brief as you possibly can in order also to listen to colleagues and Commission. Please, the floor is yours.
I will do my very best to deliver maybe 4 rather than 3 minutes. So on behalf of the 1.2 million UK nationals living in the EU 27, I'd like to thank you once again for this petition, for the opportunity to address the European Parliament and this Committee on Citizens' Rights and Brexit. Before the start of the negotiations, we were promised by both Theresa May and Michel Barnier that the 5 million citizens who have exercised their free movement rights between the EU and 27 and the UK were a priority, and that our daily lives would not change. Sitting here at the start of another week of political chaos and uncertainty in Westminster, we're a long way from seeing those promises fulfilled. This is now a key moment for the EU, how citizens who have relied on the rights that their fundamental status as EU citizens has given them will be treated post-Brexit. How we are treated will send a message now and for the future about how importantly the EU views the rights of its citizens. So where do we stand? We have a withdrawal agreement on the table with a chapter on citizens' rights. It's far from perfect. We've made our views known on this, and it deprives, for example, British citizens in the EU 27 of key rights such as continuing free movement across the EU, which is essential for many of us to continue to earn a living. But still, it's something. However, that agreement appears to be dead on arrival in London, and unless the attempts of a handful of sensible MPs bear fruit in the next couple of weeks, the UK would appear to be hurtling towards leaving the EU without a deal. This would be catastrophic for British and Europe. We face the prospect of having to deal with 27 different policies in a no-deal scenario. We're 68 days from Brexit, and only a handful of EU 27 countries have published any details on their plans on how to protect our rights. To our knowledge, no country has yet published legislation that would ensure that we remain legally resident in our host states on the 30th of March 2019. We hear that several countries intend to do so this week, and we look forward to seeing the detail. But when will we hear from the rest? It's obvious from the statements made so far that each country is dealing with us in its own way. Some countries have drawn on the rights agreed in the withdrawal agreement. Other countries have drawn on the rights agreed that exist purely in third country national legislation. Some countries are offering a transition period of 15 months. Some are offering 3 months. Some are offering something in between. UK citizens in some countries will keep their EU rights during the transition period, whilst UK citizens in other countries will keep some of them, or perhaps none. Frankly, it's a mess, and it's going to lead to discrimination and confusion. And overlaying all of this is a constantly repeated refrain that our rights will ultimately be dependent on how the UK treats the 3 million. We can understand this point of view, but we've seen how the UK has negotiated away the rights of its own citizens, us, and so forgive me if I tell you that this approach doesn't fill us with confidence. The negotiation of 27 different sets of rights will present enormous difficulties to British citizens living in the EU 27. We're a mobile population. Many of us have lived and worked in several member states, and we don't see how this unilateral approach will help us with social security and pension aggregation, without which we risk losing pension contributions made in good faith in countries where we worked for shorter periods of time. We risk an uncertain future and an even more uncertain retirement. We also need to consider our children, British citizens who've grown up living in EU 27 countries. The rug on which their hopes and dreams are built is being pulled out from underneath their feet, splitting families and giving rights in some cases to one sibling but not to the other. What does this teach the next generation of voters as they scramble for new citizenship to protect their rights? In 4 months from now, the European Parliament elections will start. You will be going back to your voters and asking them to trust you, to keep the faith and to continue supporting the European project. There are no greater supporters of this project than British citizens living in the EU 27. We left the most Eurosceptic country in the EU and exercised our free movement rights. And we've paid a price for that. 60% of us have lost our voting rights in the UK, and many of us with non-British partners will find it difficult, if not impossible, to return to live in our country of origin. We never considered ourselves to be citizens of nowhere. We were comfortable with our British and EU identities, but we've been made to choose by Theresa May. We choose the EU, but will the EU choose us? So British in Europe would like to make a plea. In the event of a no deal, take the existing text on citizens' rights in the Withdrawal Agreement and ring-fence it with the UK. Make that your Article 50 agreement in a no deal and give us the protection of an international treaty. Because if we cannot rely on the EU, who can? And if we cannot rely on the EU now, when can we? This is your moment to show that the EU is a union of citizens and not just a club of states. Please seize that moment before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the effort, all the time that you have invested in this, and we are feeling very strong sympathy with you and your case. Now, we have also invited Monique Hawkins. Can I ask you to be very brief and try not to repeat one single word of what has just been said, so that we finish in due time, 6:30, then we'd have no interpretation after that.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the 3 million. Almost 2 years ago, just a week before this petition was created, I was part of a joint delegation from the 3 million and British in Europe who'd been invited to a meeting with Michel Barnier. And in that meeting, he explained to us about nothing's agreed till everything is agreed. And I realised with a huge shock that we'd just been promoted to a higher level of bargaining chip rather than being set against each other. We are now jointly being held ransom against the UK not agreeing to the withdrawal deal. And therefore, for the last 2 years, as well as fighting and somewhat failing to keep our full complex of indivisible EU citizenships rights, and I'm thinking here especially about the full free movements for our friends, the British in Europe, we've consistently argued that our rights should be ring-fenced. What do we mean by ring-fencing? We mean that the EU and the UK should agree together to commit to adopting and implementing the citizens' rights part of the Withdrawal Agreement under Article 50, under all circumstances, even if no agreement can be reached on the other aspects. And that's the only way in which all the rights of all of us are protected by an international treaty rather than by domestic national legislation. And for the 3 million, not having protection from such an international agreement will have disastrous consequences. And I'm not being dramatic. The UK Government Department for Exiting the EU published this policy paper in December on what to do with us EU citizens in the event of no deal. Whereas the Withdrawal Agreement secured appeal rights when applying for settled status, in the event of no deal, the UK says no. Whereas the withdrawal agreement had safeguarded my right to bring my mother from the Netherlands to the UK should she need me in future, in the event of no deal, the UK says no. The UK government published this immigration bill in December. Its effect is to rip out all traces of EU free movement legislation from UK law. Our future status, already promising to reduce our rights, will be set out in what are called immigration rules. These are bits of secondary legislation attached to an Act of Parliament, and those rules can be changed with virtually no parliamentary scrutiny whatsoever. Just to illustrate, between 2012 and now, these rules have been changed a staggering 65 times. These changes are simply published somewhere, and unless someone in Parliament spots something untoward, they become law, just like that. Just such a change removed vital protections from the so-called Windrush generation, leading to the scandalous wrongful detention and deportation of many citizens. Our finite group of EU citizens in the UK needs the lifelong protection at international treaty level. And EU citizenship becomes void of any meaning if 3 million citizens in a withdrawing state are just left to whatever that state decides, and all these rights in which they trusted can be simply taken away. On behalf of the 3 million, I therefore ask you, the European Parliament, to exert whatever influence you possibly can on your 27 heads of state and on the Council to do the right thing, to mandate the Commission to approach the UK, to jointly rescue what was painstakingly agreed on citizens' rights, and to commit now to implementing it under Article 50, no matter what. And by committing now, I really do mean now, even if Article 50 is extended. And finally, as for doing the right thing, I would appeal to you to continue to exert whatever influence you possibly can to secure full free movement rights for my 1.2 million British friends. If the EU project is to stand for anything, it must do this at the very least.
Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to invite the Commission, the European Commission, Monsieur Arbeau. I know that this is very delicate. We are in daily contact with Michel Barnier on it, so it's not much of news that you can inform us with. Don't feel the pressure, just briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your kind words. Indeed, I'll be very brief. There will be a lot to say, but we don't have time. We're fully aware, of course, of the anxieties of those who exercise their right to free movements in the EU, thinking that they will enjoy these rights basically forever. And as things stand, and notwithstanding the efforts to actually get to an orderly withdrawal, the government's line in the UK means that those people who enjoyed these free movement rights will become third country nationals from the moment that exit will actually be materialized. We have done the maximum to mitigate the impact of the withdrawal of the UK on the 4.5 million citizens who are affected. This has always been a top priority for the Commission. From day one, this was at the heart of the mandate given to the negotiator. And we made also from day one the satisfactory resolution of the citizens' right as the prerequisite to any broadening of the discussions, in particular on the future relation. As early as in December 17, we already reached an agreement of principle with the UK on the sanctuarization or securization of the most essential rights of those citizens who are affected, and this translated into the actual draft withdrawal agreement published in November and endorsed by European Council in November 25th. We've been very transparent throughout the process. We have also associated very closely the 3 million and British in Europe, and we've been in contact with them very regularly. This being said, coming back for 1 second on the content of the withdrawal agreement, we have focused on the objective to guarantee that those citizens who have exercised the right to free movement can continue residing and can continue also residing where they are, and to protect their life choices, the life choices that they made until the cut-off date that will actually formalize withdrawal. The draft withdrawal agreement does safeguard the rights of residents of the affected people, their right as workers and self-employed, also a right to non-discrimination and equal treatment, and also rights in relation to social security coordination. Now, what about the effectiveness of these rights? Well, there are, and I won't get into details, but there are a number of provisions in the withdrawal agreement that actually make sure that those rights will be enforceable and actually exercisable. Of course, we are faced with the uncertainty that we all know and that you mentioned. When it comes to the point of ring-fencing, I think, again, this has always been the primary objective of Mr. Barnier, to guarantee the rights of citizens. This being said, we hear that sometimes we should resolve to actually a mini-agreement around the rights of citizens as a way to actually sanctuarize these rights. We still believe that this would be a mistake, that the best way to actually protect the 4.5 million citizens who are impacted is to find a global agreement. And the best way to actually achieve that is not, in our view, to give credit to the failure of the negotiations that will be embodied by that new direction that we will take if we were basically heading towards ring fencing. The UK has indicated that in case of no deals, the essential rights of the 3 million will be safeguarded there. We'll have to see, of course, into the details. When it comes to the Union, as you well know, the Commission has indicated in November, the 30th of November, and then in December, that it will actually favor very much a generous approach on the member states in the case of no deal. But in the case of no deal, we are faced with each party having to take unilateral action, and in that respect, both parties have indicated that they will take some generous action vis-à-vis the people, but we can't know more details at this stage because we are still very much focusing our efforts on a negotiated scenario, and therefore we don't want to envisage too quickly the no deal because we are really determined to actually seek some kind of orderly exit of the UK.
Thank you very much. It sounds like after us the flood, something like that. Okay, now the floor is open to colleagues, and I have Jude Curtin-Darling first.
Thanks. First of all, I'd like to pay tribute to the 3 million and to British in Europe for the campaign, the dignified campaign that they've run over the last few years in a context of extreme anxiety and uncertainty, which is very difficult for many people to get their heads around. And unfortunately, I think many people in Britain still don't understand the psychological impact that a decision that we took as a country in 2016 is having on people's lives, on people's health, physical and mental, and on their plans for the future. So I really pay tribute to both organisations. People come together on a voluntary basis to jointly fight for each other's rights. Ironically, we're up against a ticking clock today, and we're up against a ticking clock on Brexit, and there is a limited amount of time before the 29th of March to actually get things through. And that's why, particularly having heard our Prime Minister in the House of Commons this afternoon suggest that Plan B is Plan A, and Plan A is Plan B, and that there is no change to her proposals despite a historic defeat in the House of Commons. The EU27, I'm afraid, have to be the grown-ups in this room when it comes to people's rights. It's not a comfortable position to be in, but together with a large number of my colleagues, cross-party, from British MEPs, from across a number of parties, we wrote a letter last week to President Tusk, to Mr Barnier, to President Juncker and to Mr Verhofstadt, basically asking the EU27 to come forward with a unilateral guarantee of British citizens in Europe's rights in a way to force the UK government to do exactly the same towards the 3 million's rights in the UK. I welcome the fact that the cost of settled status has been waived this afternoon, and that those who've paid will be reimbursed, but the cost of Brexit is far more than the cost of settled status. It has been devastating for a large number of people, and now that has to end. People have to be put first in this very short period of time we have to sort things out, and I'm afraid that my country and the government that runs it will not be grown up enough to take that first step. So I plead with the EU leaders who are at the top of these negotiations to step up to this historical moment, a unique historical moment that they find themselves in, and put citizens' rights forward first, because this is about showing the value and the importance of the European project that I fundamentally believe in and will continue to fight for. But if we can't defend our citizens, then we're really, really in trouble. Thanks.
Thank you, Jude. Thank you. Claire Moody.
Thank you very much. And actually, you're going to hear a lot of the same sort of comments coming. But like Jude, I want to thank the campaigners for their brilliant campaign. And also, Chair, I want to thank you, because I know in your role as Chair of Committee Chairs, you've been doing you have been consistently supportive on this issue as well. As representatives in the UK, we all get correspondence. We get correspondence from people who lived in our regions, who now live in other European countries. We get correspondence from European citizens who live in our regions now. And some of the correspondence covers some pretty heartbreaking stories and some dreadful experiences that people have had as a consequence of what has been happening in the UK and of things going on as a result of that referendum result. It is vital that we all are here standing up for those people, being the voice of those people who are going through something that they adamantly don't want to happen, but are on the receiving end of being inflicted upon them. And as we stand here this afternoon with everything that's going on in Westminster, with, as Jude said, Plan A turning into Plan B and back again to Plan A, no perceptible change after that historic defeat, it is now necessary for the EU to do the right thing by European citizens and by those citizens who believe in the idea of Europe. So, echoing the point that has been made by the petitioners and by Jude, who spoke before, it's now time for the EU to show its courage and its convictions and to make the commitment to those citizens of the full rights that they have now and should be able to take going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, we have 4 more minutes by the grace of the interpreters. Thank you very much. After that, we ask you can leave when you feel that you can leave, because we are still English-speaking, most of us in this room now, so we will try to do without when it's 18:35. Thank you very much. And I personally am willing to continue for just to have on record what the statements made by you. Mrs. Scott Cato, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the interpreters. It's much appreciated. I'll be brief so I don't take up too much of your time. I'd also like to echo the words of my 2 colleagues in terms of the excellent work you've done in your campaigning, and we've come across each other many times, and I agree that you've acted in a noble way when you've been forced into a dreadful situation, totally beyond your control. I just want to challenge something that was said by the representative of the Commission. I understand you're not representing Mr. Barnier here, but I would quite appreciate it if you could take this back, because effectively what we're dealing with here is a situation where we have equivalent needs and potential benefits on both sides by 2 groups of citizens. So I just feel that there's nothing to be lost and everything to be gained through just matching up the needs of both those citizens and agreeing reciprocal terms between the remaining EU and the UK. I just can't see any logical reason for not doing that. And if the logical reason is something to do with forcing people to make a deal on things perhaps they think people care less about, then it is just completely outrageous to hold citizens hostage to ensure that there's some kind of overall deal. So I think it's been clear from the start that citizens who are people should have been treated differently and their rights should have been protected, and it would be of advantage to the UK citizens who are also EU citizens elsewhere in the EU and to the EU citizens who are currently residing in the UK. And I think that balance is obvious and that should be just done immediately. It should have been done 3 years ago and it should be done now.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Ward.
Well, I'm really glad we have this committee. I'm not on it, but I've been in the room many times and heard a lot of people come and give testimony to their terrible experiences of anxiety, but also coming here to offer solutions. And I think that's important, that it's not like people are being helpless victims all the time, even though they're going through terrible situations. They are actually coming forward with solutions. The idea of unilateral guarantees that the EU could give is important. I actually wrote a written question to Donald Tusk about this, I think in 2017. He was very, very non-committal about it, but it's something that many people have been talking about for a long time. We might have even asked about it before then. So we're not coming with something new necessarily. We're coming with something that already has been raised at the highest level. So I think it's really important that that letter went recently. But this is more pressure of the same kind that has already been put on people over the past couple of years. And can I just say, from my perspective, if there is one person who finds that their rights are not protected through the processes that we're going through now, then that is one person too many. And in the December agreement, I learnt that foster children would not be protected by the text that had been put forward for us to vote on. And I was very, very uncomfortable about that. So what I really mean by this is that the particular circumstances of families are so broad-ranging, we can't even imagine how complex some of the family lives may be, that even if one person's rights are not protected, for me that is one person too many. We have to do something that makes sure nobody is ever in a vulnerable situation where their rights are not protected.
Thank you very much. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President, and I will keep it down to a couple of sentences, as I promised you I would. But I would, of course, echo the comments of my colleagues about the campaign that the British in Europe group and the 3 million have waged. For many of us, this is a personal matter, and we wait to see the provisions of the withdrawal agreement, if it takes effect, and a no deal unravel potentially over the years. It is the biggest withdrawal of rights from British citizens in peacetime since the glorious revolution of 1688. And I would say to those two campaign groups, particularly to British in Europe, do not give up at the point of withdrawal, if it happens, and I still hope it won't, on that campaign for those freedom of movement rights, because I, for one, consider that there is a case to be made that it is a fundamental denial of human rights under the European Charter that a person's freedom of movement within a family would be withdrawn, meaning that their partner enjoys the ability to travel to one part of Europe for work or residential purposes, and that their husband and partner cannot, or husband, wife or partner cannot travel with them, because that means that they do not have the right to a family life. So I sincerely hope that that provision will be challenged in future if the need ever comes about.
Thank you very much. And now let's thank the interpreters very, very much for having offered us extra minutes. Have a very nice evening. You deserve it. And now the floor is to Catherine Bearder.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, I'd like to add my thanks to the campaigners who have been doing a sterling job. And thanks to my friends from various parties for their comments. I won't reiterate that. But I think what at the back of our mind, all of our minds, is the tale of the Windrush scandal, that is 50 years on, we find that people are still having to pay for decisions that were made back then. So you can see how long this goes on, which is why we have to get it right. That we, as citizens, all won the Nobel Prize for the reason, for the citizens' rights that we were all given, and for these now to be taken away is just horrific. The Commission, I understand your nervousness about making statements, but this whole point of a standalone agreement is something that we've been calling for right from day one, and there is a precedent on this. And everybody forgets this. The Irish citizens have an agreement with the UK government that we have freedom of movement for and protected rights in the UK and in Ireland. So if we can do it for the Irish EU citizens, why on earth can we not do it for the rest of the Brexit citizens that are so badly affected by this? And that's all I wanted to say. Let's hope we win this one, as I'm sure we will win fighting against Brexit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a very good example, actually. Very good example. Let's all use that. And the floor is now to Mr. Dance. It's unreal to have that kind of a name, but it's fantastic.
As is he.
I do like my name. Thank you. Yes, no, I don't want to say very much in addition, other than to obviously stress the fact that we are sat here, British MEPs from across the political spectrum, and we have been working on many issues to do with Brexit, not least campaigning against it, but actually the chief issue that has preoccupied many of us for the whole of this process has been citizens' rights. And I really just wanted to add my voice really to those saying that there is no proper reason that any of us can see why the principle of ensuring that citizens and their rights that they enjoy as citizens not be part of the negotiation process. This is something that we've said from the very start. We called for ring fencing pretty much from the offing of this entire process, and it is extremely disappointing now with the increasing spectre, although I don't think it will happen, but nonetheless it's hanging over us, the increasing spectre of no deal. It is imperative that the EU27 now take, as my colleague Jude said, grown-up action in the face of a lack of grown-up action from the UK government. And just very finally, I wanted to add my thanks to British in Europe and to the 3 million who have been outstanding campaigners, not just because I agree with the issues that they campaign on, but it's a testament to the work that they've done that the fee was indeed waived today. The £65 fee. It's nothing to celebrate because no one should be charged or celebrate the lack of charge for staying in their own homes. But the fact that the 3 million of the British in Europe have been campaigning so strongly and so effectively on this issue means that the government did, for once, do the right thing today, and they should be rightly proud of themselves.
Thank you very much. Now the floor goes back to the petitioner, to Fiona Godfrey, please.
Thank you very much. I will be brief. So first of all, thank you very much for all of your kind words about our work. None of it would have been possible without the huge amount of support we have had from very many MEPs in this House, but particularly the very many British MEPs who have been with us since day one. So thank you very much for your support. I will be very brief. We've been calling, as Monique said, for ring fencing from our very first meeting on the 28th of March 2017 with Michel Barnier. We are now speaking on a regular basis with the EU27 capitals. They all keep telling us it's too soon, at which point we just burst out laughing because we have to ask, when will it be the right time? Will that be 11:59 p.m. on the 29th of March as we face a no deal? So once again, all we can say is we very much echo what Jude and others said, that we would ask the EU to be the grown-up in the room here. We can't expect that from our government. We really, really need you to act, and we hope that you still will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me just finish where I started. The petition remains open, and we are all in a daily contact with Michel Barnier, and we're following on a daily basis, actually not a daily basis, but hour-to-hour basis, the development in the House of Commons and what's going on in the UK. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for what you have done until now, and thank you also for what you will do in days to come in order to have an orderly procedure in this case. Well, personally, I state it again, I hope that it will never take place, but I guess I'm not alone on that. Now, thanks to all of you for having attended this committee meeting, and all the best for your evening.